Now, leaked internal documents allege that Facebook cannot explicitly guarantee how data gathered about its users is repurposed and processed because of how intertwined data has become over the years. The document was written in 2021 and is warning that Facebook's existing data governance could be a threat to the company in the face of stricter regulatory scrutiny around data. For more on this, we're joined by cyber security expert at Wolfpack Information Risk, Craig Rosewarne. Very good evening to you, Craig. Thank you for your time. Should we be concerned?
Well, I think everyone who values their privacy and their security should be very concerned at this. And to a large degree, we're all very much at the mercy of the large social media online cloud providers whose services we use extensively, and to a large degree many people are actually addicted to their services and very quick just to sign away their privacy and their security at the end of the day to use these services.
And how does Facebook essentially collect the data? I mean, is it something that as a Facebook user you should really understand in terms of how Facebook does it?
Well, Facebook, like most of the other big social media users out there, we voluntarily sign up. We agree to the terms of service to utilize their platform, and we give them full access to everything at the end of the day. They provide various tools to us to restrict what we believe we are giving out. But even if you enable the strictest security and privacy settings, you still are actually signing away and agreeing to a lot more than you actually bargained for. And I can give you specifics, for example, if you would like that.
Yes, sure.
All right. So, for example, a useful tool for your readers or your listeners to actually use is a public domain website called Terms of Service Didn't Read. So it's TOSDR.org. So it is a non-profit organization that actually goes out and reads the terms of services for a lot of the online websites and social media platforms that are in use today. So you can go on there and search for sites like Google, Amazon, a whole lot of things, YouTube, etc. And when you actually click on that and you see what is actually, what is highlighted as a major risk, just to point out some, just 5 of the top ones that jump up. So number 1 is your identity is used in ads that are shown to other users. The service can read your private messages. So even though you are signing up to use Facebook, you actually give them permission to access other information that you don't think you're actually giving them. Facebook stores your data whether you have an account or not, all right? And other things like deleted content is not really deleted. So people think that, okay, I can use it when I don't want it anymore, then I'll just go and delete my profile and everything will go away, but it never ever goes away. The last little thing is the service can actually view your browser history. So did you know that when you're actually using a service like a Facebook, it's got permission to actually view all the websites that you're going to? Hence, these guys are making billions of dollars in terms of advertising revenue because they know exactly what your preferences are. They know you better than your own mother does.
So how do you protect yourself as a Facebook user if Facebook itself doesn't have any control over the use of data and doesn't even know where it's going?
Well, they do have, but remember this is a very, very powerful money-making organization. Back in before 2016, when Facebook was actually fined $5 billion by a U.S. Federal agency in terms of the work that they did with a certain company that actually extracted or provided very, very powerful analytics to allow Donald Trump to actually become president. Through the sharing of targeted advertising that either scared or pulled viewers to view certain types of content, which gave them a tainted view of what was going on in America, and obviously promoted the pro-Trump view, as an example. So that was Cambridge Analytica. As a result of that, they paid a hefty fine, which sounds like a lot of money, but it basically boils down to about a month's worth of revenue for Facebook. And even after they paid the fine, the organization shares actually went up. So they basically made up the penalty that they actually paid out. So remember, we're dealing with very, very big, powerful organizations that have got access to very, very flashy lawyers. And at the end of the day, they're there to protect their revenues and their shareholders' revenues. That's priority number one.
And where does this now leave the Facebook user, especially when it comes to that very personal information, and also considering the Protection of Personal Information Act? Is that beneficial at all?
So I guess the 2 points are, one, you as a user, and I mean, if you go and look on the actual Facebook website, you scroll down to the very bottom in terms of use and privacy notice and things like that. Facebook has done, to a large degree, a very good job in trying to highlight exactly what they're doing with your information, but no one ever reads those things. But first and foremost, you should actually take very, very strong precautionary measures to limit what you are sharing via Facebook, because at the end of the day, if you just allowing it to be wide open and anyone to view what you are posting on your Facebook, in terms of photos of your children, people must understand the bigger picture. So remember, everything that is happening in this digital realm, when you're taking a photo on a smartphone, that photograph actually has embedded geo-IP location, which in a simplified way actually that information can be extracted. You can get information about that photo, including the location of where those photographs were taken. And remember, it's not all just nice, kind people that are using these social media platforms. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, criminals would use them from a reconnaissance point of view. You've got a whole lot of other crazy people out there that are using these social media platforms to stalk and harass and bully people online as well. So you've got to have that, a slightly paranoid mindset when you're using these platforms, to be aware of the dark side of them. Of course, there's a lot of positives.
Yes.
They're free. They're very well designed. Sometimes they are quite addictive for people that don't know how to manage device time. So that's on the one side, just the actual, your personal use that you've got a fair amount of control over. But on the other side of things, no matter what security and privacy precautions you take, be aware that your information is sitting there with them. And these organizations actually share your information with a whole lot of other, let's call them service providers, that provide additional, whether it's security or marketing or logistics or monetization of that. So I might share my information with one company, but at the end of the day, there are hundreds, if not thousands of organizations that through that one entity have got access to my information. And how are they protecting your security and privacy as well?
So what advice would you give to especially young people who may be accessing and using Facebook? And also, you make mention of a very important aspect, sharing pictures of your children, which, of course, we know what was the big focal point when it comes to children being tracked, abuses and kidnappings and all sorts. So, firstly, we need to understand the tools that we're actually using. And, I think our children, I look at my teenagers and, they don't use Facebook. It's not cool enough for them. They use some of the other platforms in the meta platforms such as Instagram. And of course, don't forget there's a whole lot of other platforms that Facebook owns as well. Yes.
But understand the platforms a bit more in terms of how to use them and, what you get out of them. The kids are very good. They know the functionality, but they're not really aware of the risk. So I think we need to educate ourselves. There's a lot of good information out there. There's a lot of guides. We've got an initiative as Wolfpack where we actually have a site called alertafrica.com, which is our public service initiative where we try and provide free awareness materials, and we've got a whole lot of school materials and things like that as well. So there's a lot of free material out there and free YouTube videos for you to go and watch. So educate yourself. Look at the settings on your social media platform. And please, very, very important, we're seeing a lot of hacking taking place where criminals are hacking into people's social media platforms especially Instagram, okay, which is part of the Facebook or the Meta stable, where they're taking over people's accounts. And then they are posting as them, and to their followers, it's, they don't know any different. They believe it's the actual person posting, and obviously monetizing this and promoting all kinds of scams and other things which people are clicking on and losing money, or having their own devices compromised as well. And then I think the final thing is just please, don't overuse, don't overabuse, don't overshare information. Just be conservative in terms of usage and posting of information. There's a whole lot of other things you can speak about when you are using social media platforms, for example, like WhatsApp. Even if you are not posting something, if you are part of a group that is posting, say, racist information or extreme violent information, by association or by retweeting, for example, content or liking content, by association you are seen to be just as guilty, and you can be prosecuted in line with that as well. So, there are different risks to using social media, and people need to be aware of this.
And what would you say would be some of the challenges that make people more vulnerable when it comes to, you've mentioned the lack of education, not really knowing how to use your gadget, and perhaps not even reading the fine print on Facebook when it comes to where your data goes and how much information is being gathered about you.
I think certain demographics by their nature. So, for example, when we look at victims of scams, it's typically the older generation who are more trusting. They come from, where your word is your honor. And, of course, that holds no ground when it comes to cyberspace, where you can be anyone or anywhere in the world according to cyberspace. And, of course, there's very little morals in terms of things that are happening. So that's the one demographic. The other one, which is very much at risk, are the teenagers. And then another demographic are those looking for love and romance on social media platforms. So there's a plethora of dating apps, and obviously social media apps are being used for blooming and nurturing relationships. And of course, criminals are creating all kinds of fake profiles, and there's a whole range of different attacks. The romance scammers, you've got the sextortion elements where, a criminal creates a very sexy looking picture of a lady or a man targeting a person and builds a relationship over a few weeks, gets them to share very sensitive photos and videos, and then extorts money out of them by threatening to go to their work, family, social media contacts, etc. So we've had all kinds of real horror stories reported to us, and where we've tried to investigate and assist. But once the cat's out the bag, there's very little that you can actually do. So prevention is prize number one.
Yeah. When it comes to some red flags, what should we be looking for as the users of these social media platforms? You make mention of, the dangers, but especially when it comes to somebody who may be stealing your profile or committing some form of crime against you, how would you know what to look out for?
So, like crimes are committed in the real world, the digital realm just amplifies it, allows it to happen at a much faster and larger scale. So the same rules basically apply. If someone is rude to me or threatening me in the real world, there's a course of action to take as well. So sometimes people think that by hiding behind a computer, by changing their identity, that they are invisible. The reality is, unless they're very clever and they know what they do, what to do to hide your identity, like in the real world, you leave digital footprints in cyberspace as well. So people must realize that, and you can get caught and you can get prosecuted, and especially now in South Africa, there's you've spoken about the Protection of Personal Information Act. That's one thing, but there's also the new Cybercrime Act that's been released now as well last year. Yeah. And there it dictates a range of different types of criminal offenses and very, very harsh punishments as well. And this is going to increase more and more compliance is going to be put onto companies in terms of how they are protecting companies' information and individuals' personal information. As we've seen in the case recently with TransUnion, how they were taken to task by the information regulator. and a whole lot of things leveled at them in terms of what they have to now do going forward, which is very, very onerous.
So let's say you've been a victim of some form of crime. What are the first few steps that are really crucial? Do you call the police? Where do you go?
So let's talk real world. If you are a victim of, say now someone is, for example, there's different types of crimes. Say now someone is harassing you, bullying you, threatening you online. Even if you never see that person, that crime is still considered harassment. So there is the Harassment Act, for example, that makes it very, very clear that crimes committed in the digital realm are considered harassment as well. So there's a whole procedure basically outlined in that act, which can be downloaded off the internet, and it outlines the steps that you must go and report it to a magistrate. They would then serve it onto the offender, for example. So that, now we're assuming that the person is in South Africa and that you know who the person is. The moment we start crossing borders, then all kinds of other complications comes in, because number one, does this country have jurisdiction for us? And even if it's a country across, one of our neighboring countries, for example, even that adds a huge amount of complexity. It makes it very, very difficult to try and actually take the case further. You typically would have to utilize private capabilities, lawyers, etc., to try and serve anything, because going the normal traditional legal law enforcement route, especially in this country, is a very, very difficult thing to get right. So there are acts in place. There are steps that can be followed, but remember now, if it happens in cyberspace, it creates an extra level of complexity, because whilst I might think the person is sitting in the UK according to the IP address, the reality is if you use a VPN application, you can change your IP address to be anywhere in the world. So trying to point the finger of attribution at someone and actually try and locate exactly where they are becomes an additional challenge to what we have in the physical realm.
Very well, thank you. Very informative. Thank you for your time. Cyber security expert at Wolfpack Information Risk, Craig Rosewarne, warning about the dangers of social media and the cyberspace, which can be very dangerous.